last years of the 19th century, that human affairs were being watched from the timeless worlds of space. No one could have dreamed we were being scrutinized as someone with a microscope studies creatures that swarm and multiply in a drop of water. Few men even considered the possibility of life on other planets. And yet, across the gulf of space, minds immeasurably superior to ours regarded this Earth with envious eyes. And slowly and surely, they drew their plans against us.
Broadcasting live
from a tiny studio somewhere in North America.
This is Dark Matters Radio Live. And now I give you your host,
the silverback of ufology.
Here's Don Ecker.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, and anybody else that may be out there, welcome back to a brand new show of Dark Matters Radio right here on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. Now, I guess I owe you an explanation about what's been happening the last month, 5 weeks or so. My wife, about 5-6 weeks ago, had a doctor's appointment. She was having some problems with her ankle, and she went to the appointment, came home, but unbeknownst to both of us, she brought back a virus. And within a couple of days, it started to hit. And, you know, I got to tell you, for years, I have not suffered with the flu or anything. It's been, other than some organic body things, okay, I've been basically sick free. I haven't been ill with anything. Well, this thing hit. Initially, I thought it was COVID, and Vicky, as a matter of fact, was pretty convinced too. She got the COVID medication, but then it turned out not to be COVID, at least for me. It was that respiratory virus, and it knocked me flat. The first 2 weeks, I could barely even talk. And a little by little, I started to get a little bit better. I basically treated this with over-the-counter medications, and especially expectorates to get that mucus out of me. Finally, I am now just about, I won't say 100%. I'll say I'm about 92%. I still have a little problem, much less than I did previously, with congestion, but it's still there a bit. Now, I haven't been coughing much, but you know, if I do, well, I do. But I felt I needed to tell you all what the problem has been with Dark Matters Radio. It's been an illness thing, and my God, I'll tell you what. Had I have known that there was a vax shot for this stuff, RSV, okay, I would have gone to get it. But unfortunately, when I found out about this thing, and I never dreamed in 1,000 years that I would get hit with it, I didn't know enough to go get the vaccination. So anyway, enough of that. Now, tonight, we're going to be doing a program. We have a guest that I'm going to have Gary and Mark introduce, because Gary and Mark, Mark primarily, and he told Gary about this. Gary reached out to our guest. His name is Manny. He's got a website. He's going to tell you all about that. But he did a couple hour, basically documentary on one of the names that's been banged around the UFO field, UAP field, for about 5-6 years now, on Lue Elizondo. Now, I have said this in the past, and in full disclosure, okay, I'm going to tell you now my connection to Elizondo, and I'm going to give you a little background before I bring on the rest of the panel. But about roughly 2 years ago, obviously prior to his passing, I had a very good friend, close friend for 30 years, over 30 years, Tracy Torme. Now, Tracy was the son of the Velvet Fog, Mel Torme, the famous singer. And Tracy was famous in his own right as a television writer, a television producer. He was one of the top screenwriters the first 2 years of Star Trek, The Next Generation. As a matter of fact, one of the episodes Tracy wrote won a Peabody Award. And then, of course, Tracy is known for his series Sliders. Now, in all the time that I knew Tracy Torme, Tracy always expressed his fascination and interest in the UFO topic. Okay. He was one of those people with a curiosity, and he also acted on his curiosity. He went to UFO hotspots. He went to cattle mutilation hotspots with some of the top researchers at that time. And of course, with my wife and I publishing UFO magazine, my wife, Vicky, knew Tracy. I met him. We clicked almost immediately. So over the years, whenever he would have a question about something in the field, he often would call me up. Well, a couple of years ago, he called me up about Lue Elizondo. And I told him I didn't know Elizondo. I knew of him from the television series that was on the History Channel. I believe it was Unexplained. And it ran every week for a couple of seasons, several seasons. And I got to tell you, I was somewhat impressed with it. Now, having been in the field as long as I have been, and that goes back to the 80s, all right, and I've been in deep, I butted heads with all kinds of people. The Pentagon, NASA, civilian skeptics, others. Over the years, thousands of people I've interfaced with in one way or another. So Tracy said, well, this is a guy that I want to see if I can get in touch with. And I said, great, man. Let me know how you fare. Well, he did get in touch with Elizondo. And they began conversing quite a bit. And Tracy mentioned my name. And he said, he said, Lou, you really ought to get on Dawn's show, Dark Matters Radio. And Lue Elizondo told him, he said, yeah, that's something I could certainly do. So Tracy asked him if he would send me his number that I could contact him. Well, he did. Okay. I got his number. Now, I didn't call him immediately, but look, having done what I did in the military and having the background I had in the military and what Elizondo's background was alleged to have been, I figured, well, this guy's definitely going to do a dive on me. Well, it just so happens that I've butted heads with a few folks at the Pentagon, higher echelon folks. And I broke 2 stories in the early 90s that basically kind of gave them a black eye. And then I followed it up by doing a number of television appearances, NBC, and 5 or 6 on Larry King Live when he was still on CNN before he died. Well, the last one I did on Larry King Live was with Jim Oberg, Dr. Jim Oberg, a NASA contract scientist. And something else that's not well known about Oberg, and which told me a lot later when I discovered it, he had been an Air Force nuclear officer. Now, if you know anything about covert intelligence, if you know anything about security classifications, security restrictions, you'll know that Oberg was well versed in the cover the stuff up business, okay? I mean, after all, a nuclear officer in the United States Air Force. So anyway, at the time, I was not aware of that. So we go on Larry King Live. The story that I had broken was on the STS-48 shuttle video, where they encountered something in near-Earth orbit. Then something appeared to have shot at this bogey, this UFO, this unidentified object, and things took off from there. Well, by the end of the program, I can honestly say, and he still has not forgiven me, I ate Jim Oberg's lunch on live television. And I even had him screaming at me that the only reason I came on the show was to sell magazines. Well, hell yes, we were publishing UFO magazine. The more people that knew about it, the better. But that had nothing to do about why I was there. So, to get back to the present, so Lue Elizondo undoubtedly did some research on me. Now, I got to tell you up front, this is my speculation. I don't know this for an ironclad fact, but having been a criminal investigator, I put 2 and 2 together and came up with 4, not 5, okay? Somebody told him, do not appear with this guy. Now, why do I say that? Well, I waited a couple of weeks and then I called him up. Got him on the phone. It was, by the way, his cell phone. Got him on the phone. As soon as I identified myself, he said, oh, Don. He said, oh, geez, yeah. Well, I can't talk to you. I'm in the middle of something right now. Look, I think this was either a Monday or a Tuesday that I called him. He said, I'm going to call you up this weekend and then we can talk. And I said, sure, great, I understand. So I hung up, assured in the fact that Elizondo would call me up. And I waited the weekend, all Saturday, all Sunday, nothing. So I waited another 4 or 5 days, then I called him again. Exactly the same thing. I'll call you this weekend. Well, he never did. I tried one more time, okay? Same identical thing. So I knew then this guy is bullshitting and gaslighting me for whatever reason. And I started thinking about the Pentagon. Then it became clear, okay? But this guy ain't going to talk to me. Now, he's gone on every other podcast you can imagine, okay? All across the board, been on TV, et cetera, et cetera. But he wanted nothing to do with me. So I got to tell you up front, I'm a little biased about Lue Elizondo. I'm a little biased. I'm not going to lie about that. But at any rate, so along comes our guest, Manny. Now, Mark Center discovered Manny first. Matter of fact, Mark called me up and told me about this. And he said, I also told Gary. Well, Gary ended up reaching out to Manny. They began communicating. And if it wouldn't have been for the damn virus that I was battling, he'd have been on weeks ago. But unfortunately, I couldn't do it until tonight. And tonight, we're going to have him on. And Chanel, if you'd bring up the panel, please, Mark, Gary, and Manny. Mark and Gary, do you want to go ahead and introduce Manny? Because you guys have had a lot more contact with him than I have. Gary,
Mark,
you want to take it away?
Well, Mark in particular is just, I love being friends with this guy because, one, I like most of the films that he like. We are both cinephiles, okay? We like movies. And, but he was talking one night about this documentary called Who's Lue? And I'm like Cindy Lou who? Like, I didn't know what he was talking about. And then he explained and he gave me the link. And I'm like, he says, you really should go watch this. And so I did. And I just was floored at how much you had done. And I'm talking about this guy right here, Manny, the research he had done in making this video. And at first, I kind of giggled at how often you say, who's Lou? And I started like going, is he fucking with us? Is he trolling us? But then when I finished the video, I realized, no, this is a really good video. I think that you could probably do some tweaking and editing on a thing and put that out as a DVD Blu-ray. I really do think that. It's so informative, and it asks really the single most important questions about this guy. So that's it. That's my introduction. This is Manny. He made a great video called Who's Lou? And it's really a great watch. If you are curious about all this A-tip bullshit, because so much, I start feeling like, especially when you see the first introduction of Lue Elizondo, it sounds like a pitch meeting. And when you look at his history, which you talk about in the documentary, this guy has done a lot of businesses that have thrived for a bit, but mostly they seem to have failed. And this is beginning to feel like another business. Like it's snake oil salesman, overselling who he is. And he's gotten certain people, one person in particular that bothers me is George Knapp's involvement. Because I've always liked and admired that man. But he is like hooked to this guy's hip in a weird way that I am confused by. And I think everybody in this room is confused by how George Knapp is allowing himself to work with people like Corbell and Lue Elizondo, because these guys are very questionable in what they know. So go ahead, Manny.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me on, everybody. I appreciate you, Mark, for finding the video, Jerry for reaching out to me, Don for everything that you do. And I'm glad to be here to talk about this. When you go back, just kind of, you touched on a few things there. And I guess the one of them that stands out to me is you talk about when Lue Elizondo first was presented to us, which was at the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences staged press release in Seattle, which was, I think, like a week after he quit the Pentagon, which to me was a huge red flag. Within 7 days of quitting the Pentagon, this guy's on stage and they're making these, stock offerings and promising to build this flying car with a power source that's going to revolutionize the world and change everything. And then they've got, Lue Elizondo, Christopher Mellon, Steve Justice, Hal Puthoff, Tom DeLonge, all up on stage. And it's like, what is going on here? You know, like,
Right.
are they going to change the world? These guys, are they going to upset everything from the personal transport industry to the weapons industry to airlines, cars? Everything's going to be upended, and these guys are going to do it out of this, you know, beachfront property in Encinitas, California.
That's what I'm talking about, Manny. That was a pitch meeting. That's what that sounded like to me. It didn't sound like an introduction. It sounded like they were pitching an idea.
Yeah, and they definitely were, and they didn't come out and say it, but that was all centered around the public stock offerings that To the Stars Academy was offering to the public, trying to get, I think it was $50 million in stock investors to buy into the company at that point. You know, and that was the first of, I think, 4 or 5 that they did, trying to get people to buy in to help, you know, fund this flying car thing that never really materialized. And in fact, quietly was swept under the rug after about 2 years. Yeah, so that's part of it. And that press release, like you say, when you say it's like a pitch meeting, it really was. There was no press there in the room. There was no audience. So when they're sitting there looking around at people and nodding, they're actually looking at an empty room that's got like a guy with a boom mic and a camera, and that's it. You know, like there's no audience there. There's no press there to ask questions. It was completely staged. There was, you know, like you hear every boot scrape and kick of the podium and everything. It just echoes in that room because it might as well have been on a sound stage at, you know, Universal Studios or something. There was no, it wasn't a press conference. It was a pitch meeting. They were just pitching the public. But I got to say that
if it was a press meeting, there would have been press there.
Right. And questions, there would have been a Q&A, right? You know, there should have been some kind of pushback on some of this stuff, some kind of follow-up, but there was none of that. It was just a hype thing and the them alluding to the stock sales, you know.
Let me pop in here for just a second, because I have some serious questions about this too. Now, going all the way back to the late 80s, when I came on board UFO magazine, never in my wildest dreams would I have ever believed that an undersecretary of state leading on military intelligence matters, DIA, would somebody from that rarefied atmosphere been involved in public UFO discussion, UAP today? And that, of course, is Christopher Mellon. I got to tell you, initially, that blew my mind. Now, as far as Steve Justice goes from Lockheed, I'm only about 15 minutes from where in Burbank, well, 20 minutes, where they did so much of their top secret work on things like the SR-71 and others. The fact that this guy was involved. And then Hal Puthoff. Now, look, by the way, speaking of Hal Puthoff, I have, and I'm gonna mention this now, I have a series of books here. As a matter of fact, I've been telling a number of people about these. There's a guy, and although he's dropped out of sight recently, by the name of Gary Beckham, wrote a series of books, and Puthoff figures prominently in all of these. Gary Beckham, his first book came out called Spies, Lies, and Polygraph Tape. Knowing the Future, the UFO Spy Games. And you see, Beckham had a very well-known internet presence 10, 12, 15 years ago called Starstream Research. And he was deep into intelligence matters. And of course, all these names at one point or another got mentioned in these 4 books. These 4 books, incidentally, and hey, I've got no financial anything to do with this. I haven't even talked to Beckham in 10 years or more. But The books, if you have an interest, and they're relatively inexpensive, go to Amazon to get them. Gary Beckham. Beckham is spelled Bekkum. The books are Spies, Lies, and Polygraph Tape, Quantum of Strangeness, Knowing the Future, the UFO Spy Games, and actually my favorite, because the primary guy in this book, Ingo Swann, was a friend of mine, To the Moon and Back with Love. Now, when you read these, I got to tell you, it's going to blow your mind. What Beckham has uncovered and the people, the players involved in this, but one of them being Hal Puthoff, former CIA and a lot of other intelligence background. Now, with that being said, all right, what the hell is his game? Kit Green, another player from the agency, CIA, and others. There's some very, very strange stuff going on. And what was the ultimate thing with this To the Stars Academy? And for God's sakes, Tom DeLonge, Blink 184, what the hell does that have to do with any of this business? Okay. So, yeah, there's a hell of a lot of questions there. So, Manny, I'll let you get back to it because I just had to get that out there.
Also, it's Blink 182 for all you music nerds out there.
Oh, what did I say?
Blink 184, which is something you do in the medical field.
Hey, Gary, screw you.
All right.
Right. So that's kind of a Pandora's box you just opened there, Don. I mean, you covered a whole lot of names, a lot of issues. I mean, we got Steve Justice, Hal Puthoff, Kit Green, Tom DeLonge. Where do these players all fit in? Go back a little bit further, and you'll see instead of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, you've got Joe Firmich's International Academy of Arts and Sciences. Has a lot of these same players. Kit Green and Hal Puthoff are right there in Brandon Fugel's airplane bay where they've got this thing set up and this anti-gravity device, and they're trying to build the same thing back in, 2013, 2015, like kind of that time frame before anybody ever heard of Lue Elizondo or To the Stars Academy. Tom DeLonge, of course, goes back. His interest in the UFO field goes back to as far as he's been talking to people. There was a documentary made with him that was released that showed that he's had his personal library is amazing. He's got every UFO book ever written in there and believes every single line written in every single one of them as an absolute truth. It's kind of interesting. His name to me came on the scene with the WikiLeaks that were in the emails that were sent to John Podesta, where he was basically talking about UAP, UFOs, and that sort of thing. It was like, hey, coach, put me in. If you guys need a celebrity type that want, to be a face of this thing, I'm your guy. So I'm not too surprised that someone got a hold of him and tapped him at some point to be a public face for some kind of group of people. I do find it interesting, though, that the second go around at To the Stars Academy, you've got this addition. You've got the same kind of group as the first one. You've got Hal Puthoff and Kit Green behind the scenes, kind of doing the science of stuff. But then you add to them Tom DeLonge, you add to them Christopher Mellon, and of course Lue Elizondo, which is why we're here, to talk about. Christopher Mellon, there was an article in early 2016 that was in the Huffington Post, I think, that was an interview with Leslie Kane. And he says in that article, in all my years of experience in the government, I'd never seen anything to believe that there's a government conspiracy or cover-up of UFOs, UAPs, and aliens. Never believed it. And then you cut to the end of 2016, and he's done a complete 180, and he's with this disclosure movement, as I call it, which is anything but a disclosure movement. It's a movement, but it's not about disclosure. And that's that group that we see today. And so you got to ask yourself, what happened to Christopher Mellon in 2016 that he did a complete 180 on his point of view and went from being the guy who says, none of this is true to it's all true. Everything is true. I'd like to know the answer to that question. I'd like to think it was more than just a simple demonstration that somebody like Hal Puthoff, came to and was like, look, it's all true. I can tell you, I've heard that back in 2008, the military industrial complex was trying to get rid of a UFO and give it back to the government and all this stuff. Like, I would think that a guy like Mellon would have needed some serious hardcore evidence to be swayed in that point of view. maybe he got it. Maybe he didn't. I don't know. Maybe he knows that this is not about flying saucers and little green men, that it's about a piece of captured technology from Germany or Russia or China or somebody else. I mean, only he really knows that. I don't have my mind reading cap. I lost it in a poker game once down in Texas, so I could only speculate, you know. But you know, there's that group of people is real interesting. The To the Stars Academy group, you know, and looking at what they promised us in the first 2 years versus what they delivered, and then what's happened to that group since then, you see a distinct shift. And in my documentary, I called it Plan B, you know, because it seemed like whatever their plan A was, which was to build this flying car, to capitalize on the cooperative research development agreement that they had with the U.S. Army, the CRDA, and then also to do all these other programs and stuff, that just really didn't come to fruition and eventually got swept under the rug. And instead they made a movie about a werewolf and you know, a UFO in a hangar and like this really, you know, like cartoons about drug dealing bears, you know, like that's what they've come up with. And music, you know, like it's completely different than what they promised us. You know, but when they first came out, I was real, like when I first saw Lue Elizondo on the stage, I hate to say this, but I completely discounted him. I just thought this guy is just talking out of his rear end. Like he's got all these claims, but not one single document to prove that what he's saying is true. Like he sat there and he was like, my name's Lue Elizondo and I'm here to tell you the phenomenon is real. And he put this smirk on his face that it just did not sit right with me at all. My internal BS detector was just going, don't trust this guy. Like, you know, like something's wrong with him. And that's the used car salesman vibe that I got from him. And while he was doing Unidentified, the TV program, and he was still with To the Stars Academy, I didn't really take a lot of stock in him. I didn't pay a lot of attention to him because it just seemed to me like somebody who was going to come out, say that they were like, ran the Pentagon's UFO program and all this stuff, get all this hype behind him, and then just use it to launch his celebrity career, to get on talk shows and go to the UFO conventions and be a guest speaker and things like that. But I didn't see anything past that. And so to me, it was just like, okay, he's America's Nick Pope, you know, like, okay, so we got our own now, you know, like, here we go. We got our own groovy, you know, and I didn't pay a lot of attention to him, but it wasn't until after he left To the Stars Academy and he joined the social media, he joined To the Stars Academy, or I'm sorry, he joined Twitter, and he started going onto these podcasts, and I started to see a trend there that made me really suspicious and wary. It was this creating of an echo chamber. It was only going on podcasts that were 100% supportive of him and would not question his narrative in the slightest bit, which is something I think that you touched on a little bit there earlier, Don, where you said that you felt like maybe he had dug into you a little bit and maybe that's why he didn't come on your show, is that either someone told him not to because he would be too questioning, or that he felt like it might expose him to kind of a gotcha moment where it would expose him, you know, because he'd be too questioning and push back on some of his stuff, which I still have yet to see. And all of the hundreds of podcasts that he's done, even to this day, the ones he just did most recently.
He only does his friendly ones. He only does friendly ones.
100%.
Well, it's worse than that. I try to keep Don up on this because he's not so much into the socials. He's been on these podcasts and on YouTube with unknowns. I mean, I see him pop up. And
I've never heard
who
of
the
him.
hell is this?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So I got a question. So to back up a bit, I found you on Truth Seekers with Stephen Kimbian. That's where I saw it first. And he played an extended like clip of the documentary before it was released. So I watched that and I said, oh, this might be interesting. So then I watched the whole thing, 3 hours long, a little long, a lot of who's Lou, but I found it kind of funny because I would wait.
Kind of giggled at the who's Lou,
right?
And you should have like hired somebody with like one of those creepy voices. Who's Lou?
Right.
It was kind of like if it was going to be on TV before and after the commercial, right? Who's
right?
Lou? Right.
Yeah, it had that 70s feel to it, didn't it?
Yeah.
It was a perfect bumper for that. Just, you know.
Yeah.
Set him up and bring him back.
It's fine. So, Can you expound upon, because I do watch a lot of Steven's stuff, but it's pretty woolly. He's got very long videos, and you've got to have patience to watch his stuff. But he's the only young guy out there who's calling a spade, and he calls people out right to their face, and says, "You want to sue me? Sue me." So when Lue was out there recently, he started talking about remote viewing and other things and making these new claims that nobody else has known about until, like you said, he went on socials. And then, much like a lot of these guys, they start adding to the story because it isn't, it's not interesting enough. So let's add, the wolf on the ranch and all that stuff. Let's add more and more and more. So, other than remote viewing, have you uncovered some stuff in the past year or so that you think he's just trying to build up his bona fides?
Yeah, there was a lot of that in his book, in my opinion, where he's placed himself into stories, or even he doesn't even really place himself into some of the stories. He just retells them, and then it's like, oh, and it's all true. But if you're not real savvy and you're not reading between the lines, you're going to miss the part where he's not in the story. And so you're going to think he was a part of everything going back to Roswell. I mean, like he's claiming that there was the second UFO crashing at Roswell is a fact because I think he says in his book, Hal Puthoff told him so. There's no evidence of that. It's just, I've heard this from credible sources. And there was a bunch of other stories in his book where it was the same thing. The remote viewing program going back to, that was something that kind of behind closed doors, I think people had known about, like in his inner circle. There are people that I've talked to that were a part of his inner circle at one point, but have since left, been kicked out, or are no longer welcome there, or realized that he was not who he says he was and left with their own accord. And they've all said the same thing, that he tried to pretend that he was a remote viewer, behind closed doors. But that's something I find interesting because in his first round of podcasts and on YouTube, he always downplayed that and would never ever say that. He'd never ever once claimed that he was part of the legacy Stargate program, and was trained by remote viewers like Hal Puthoff, or was in their circle or anything like that. Like not necessarily Hal Puthoff, but Russell Targ or some of the other Stargate viewers. But in his book, he definitely insinuates that. He puts himself right there, right after the Stargate program was canceled, and says like, the colonel who was trying to keep the program going, saw this in me and tried to bring this out of me, which I find extremely suspect that he would never mention that publicly until his book. And then there's no evidence to support it. And
well, let me pop in for just a second. The CIA are the people that supposedly shut it down in the mid 90s. But, okay, you don't cancel a goddamn program that you've been getting a lot of value from for over 20 years, with each year continuous government financing, and then shut it down on the word of one guy, CIA guy, that said, well, we didn't feel we were getting our benefit from it. That program was, and I'm going to go 85 to 90% moved from CIA and DIA to the NSA. No such agency, the National Security Agency. That's where I am convinced today it is. So please, Manny, go ahead.
Right. So, and if it was moved out of that program, then that still would contradict Elizondo's claims, because the people he talks about weren't, the colonel, it was an Army colonel. I forget his name off the top of my head. Eugene something. But anyways, it just seemed real interesting to me. And it seemed like I think, like Mark was saying, it seemed like something that he threw out there to stay relevant because his story had been getting old. And there's some other things like that. Jeremy McCowan, who worked on the Unidentified program television show with him, said something about that in his article series that he wrote about his experiences with Lue Elizondo, about how when he was on his way to Lue's house to go film something, that Sean Cahill, who was one of Lue Elizondo's kind of right-hand guys, was in the car with Jeremy McCowan and was pumping him for personal information that was then fed back to Jeremy through Lue Elizondo a couple of days later through Lue's remote viewing, where he was getting things wrong, so he had somebody out in front. It's kind of like the questionnaire that you fill out in the lobby of the show of the remote viewer. Right.
Well,
and then
evangelists do the same thing.
Right. And so that's what you were seeing there. And as far as other stories in the book, I'd have to kind of go through it one by one. But I think there's other things like, the best one was the Guantanamo Bay stuff, the Gitmo stuff. There was a rumor circulating on Wikipedia. There was a little blurb about Lue being down at Gitmo, and that came from, in my opinion, a couple of different sources. But there was, I think, his performance review that was made public in his ICIG complaint had said that he was sent down there to inspect something and to report back to somebody at the Pentagon about the status of something down at Gitmo. There was another document that John Greenwald at the Green Vault or the Black Vault had picked up on that talked about how he was down there Lue had been sent down there to do some sort of security clearances on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's interpreter, an interpreter for his lawyer or something like that. So it was basically mundane stuff. And in fact, that document is where the name Faceless Bureaucrat came up, which is kind of an interesting name that we should talk about at some point later. Ask me about it when we talk about some of the shenanigans that have gone on social media around this guy. But they referred to Lue in this document as a faceless bureaucrat who just showed up and was like, yeah, this guy can have security clearance or whatever. But that spawned into him Elizondo being dubbed as America's Darth Vader, who was in charge of Camp 7 at Guantanamo Bay and was doing all the torturing down there. This literally is in his book. And he talks about using his psychic remote viewing powers to essentially terrorize a prisoner to go into his cell at night in spiritual form as like an angel and to shake his bed.
To become the next Stephen Greer? Is that what's going on here? Building his own cult?
It's funny because according to Lue, he wanted to destroy ufology and named Stephen Greer as a reason for wanting to do that. He said this in podcasts. He says, I want to destroy ufology. I want to tear it apart and rebuild it in a new image. He's like, I hate ufology, which to me seems weird that you would come into a community
like you, Don, because you're
part of the book. Yeah. I mean, what does he mean by that? Like I said in my film, I said that he wanted to do it just to take over. He come in, he created this big war and this big kerfuffle so that he could rise to the top and be like, now I'm in charge. And he said that directly. He's talked when talking about Dr. Greer, he said things like, hey, there's a new UFO training board in town, get on board or get run over, things like that, where you're just like, man, is this all about this guy's ego and money? Because to me, it was always a bigger topic, and that's what got me interested in ufology, was that it was about more than any one individual, more than one story. It's about the disclosure of alien life, of a extraterrestrial intelligence that's out there that may or may not be coming to Earth, and then from there, what has our government known about it and when? That to me is what disclosure is the revelation of something new. It's not about getting a Tic Tac UFO declassified so it could be licensed to Bob Bigelow from his new aerospace company or whatever, which is what it seems like we're seeing now. Disclosure is all about technology, which is why you have things like eminent domain and the UAPDA, the UAP Disclosure Act that was written. And there's such a sticking point about technology. And it's like, I thought disclosure was about revelation of information, not about technology, so that's just it's kind of where we're at today. We're kind of taking this widening route, but
is there a connection? Do you know about a connection? What has been the connection between Lue and Corbell?
There has to be a connection. There has to be.
From what I see, and I follow both of these people, and all of this stuff, a lot of it happens on social media. So if you're not there on social media, you're going to miss a lot of it. And specifically, a lot of it happens on Twitter, on UFO Twitter. And Twitter is kind of, and I just want to explain this real quick for people who don't know. UFO Twitter is kind of the backbone of online social media ufology. Like everything seems to stem from there. And then it goes to Facebook, it goes to Reddit, it goes to other sites and things like that. But it seems like the core is UFO Twitter, and everybody's on Twitter. Jeremy Corbell's on Twitter, George Knapp's on Twitter. You know, like pretty much everybody who is in the ufology field for the most part is on Twitter. So it seems like that's kind of the melting point. And it's not good, bad, or ugly. Say what you will about Twitter. That's just kind of the reality, is that everybody's there. Now, following Corbell and Elizondo, they obviously have worked together. I mean, like if you go back to like pre 180 day report, you know, go back to like 2021, 2022, they were on newscasts saying the same exact thing almost verbatim. You know, UAP are flying through our airspace with impunity. They're threatening our nuclear capabilities. They're flying near our nuclear silos. They're flying near our nuclear facilities, all this sort of things, almost verbatim. So they were definitely at one point were on the same page, but they've since have kind of parted ways. And you see that George and Knapp and Jeremy Corbell have kind of gone and done their own thing with their the Weaponized podcast. And then of course the films that Jeremy Corbell is making. And then
They're terrible. They're terrible.
Are terrible. You know, and then George Knapp's reporting on News Nation and on his KLAS in Las Vegas. And it seems like what you get there is that George and Jeremy got more of the Dave Grush side of things. So when Dave Grush came out, he was more involved with them. And Jay Stratton, you're seeing the same thing. There's kind of been a division in that camp where people like Jay Stratton have gone and been like, oh, I'm going to go with George and Jeremy, and are really pushing back. Up until recently, Jay Stratton's wife, who is a moderator on the Skinwalker Ranch Discord server, held a watch party earlier this year of Who's Lue. It was like, everybody's got to see this. Everybody's got to see this. This Lue Elizondo guy, I regret telling people to trust him. These are words out of Jay Stratton's wife's mouth. And she's like, I regret telling people to trust Lue Elizondo. He's full of crap. Everything he says is a lie. He takes people's stories. And that goes back to kind of the beginning of this year. I think it was Stephen Greenstreet who reported, who has an inside with Jay Stratton too, that there was kind of a division there where Jay was getting tired of basically Lue taking his stories and his fame and stealing it and putting it in his book and saying, hey, this is stuff that I did. So there's kind of a division there. And that kind of goes with your question mark that where does Jeremy Corbell and George Knapp lie? It seems like they're more on the team Stratton than they are team Elizondo. And by way of that,
aren't they more public about this? Is my problem with these guys is if they aren't in the same camp, then why aren't they expressing that and more openly contradicting this shit? Because Jeremy Corbell's a nut job. Absolutely. I won't take that back. Fuck him. He can sue me. I don't own anything, you cocksucker. I get so tired of this guy. He makes this one documentary.
Hey,
looks like
Jagari. Yeah. If he does, that's going to fucking blow back on me. And
don't sue Don. He doesn't like anything I say.
If it blows back on me, guess who's going to blow up on you?
You. All I'm going to say is this is my opinion, not those of KGRA or of Don Ecker or this guy Hung Kao above me. This is my opinion. I don't like Jeremy Corbell. He makes that one documentary, and all it is, it's about him. It's not really about his subject. It's about him. It's all about him and his feelings and all this. God, it was like he was high and then made a film for people who are high to watch. And I got so annoyed watching that guy's stuff. And he allowed himself to be involved in that shit down in, where was that, Mark? Where they had the Mexican mummies, alien mummies.
With Jaime Maussan.
Yeah, that guy, you know, like what the hell? They had Grush down there with him. And that was set up by George Knapp and Corbell. How serious are these guys to do something stupid like that? That hurts everything. And it was said in the chat. You know, you got a few supporters, Manny, in the chat, by the way, on Rumble and on Twitter.
Cool.
And I'm telling you now, one of you being quoted over on Twitter, there's another video out there saying that this guy, Lue, is going to hurt everything, and people will hurt people in the long run.
And I think that's part of it. Like, there's, for one, that they are, even though they've split ways, it seems pretty clear that they're still sympathetic and they're still working towards a common goal. You know, like whatever that goal is, it's just this closure movement. And I think that's part of the reason that Jeremy and George probably just don't come out and straight up blast Lue Elizondo. And the other part is that when you go after and criticize Lue Elizondo, he doesn't come after you directly. Instead, he's got some very secondary ways to get at you and to strike back, but he's very vindictive and he will come after you.
Have you experienced that, Manny?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Since my documentary, in fact, it was within hours of the documentary coming out that I started to experience that. And it's been nonstop since. And we can get into that. What's that?
In what way?
So before the documentary even came out and during the live premiere of it, there was a group of people. One of the shows of clips that I used was a show called Tom Fessler. And the reason I used the clips and fair used them was because Elizondo was on there saying some very revelatory things that he had not said anywhere else. And so in order to speak and to comment about them and to show people in the film what I was talking about, I needed to use those clips. This show had informed me that they would not let me use their clips. They were going to file copyright strikes against my channel to get the film taken down, and that they were going to do everything in their power to stop me from speaking this truth that I had or putting this show out. So when the live premiere was going on, they came into my chat channel and were just flooding the chat with attacks and vitriol, saying that I was doxing Lue, that I was attacking his family, that I was going after his wife and his kids, things like that were just ridiculous and weren't even a part of the film at all. But just straight up trying to attack me. Within a week of the film being out, I've got copyright strikes on the film by this Tom Fessler character, the History Channel of all people, for using like a still frame from one of the unidentified programs when I was talking about Lue's involvement with the show. And then To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. All three of them tried to copyright strike it to get it taken down and crowd strike me and try to get me permanently banned off of YouTube. And they succeeded in taking the film down for close to a month while I fought the copyright strikes and gave them my personal information and said, look, if you want to sue me in a civil court over copyright infringement, go right ahead. But I'm telling you right now, I'm going to assert fair use. And under my understanding of the law, I'm going to win. So here's all my information. Do what you will with it. But you need to take these strikes off. Ultimately, that's ended up what happening. YouTube sided with me after about a month, put the movie back online. But during that time, somehow three people got my personal information: Tom Fessler, the History Channel, and To the Stars Academy. And all of a sudden, this guy, Tom Fessler, and his producer on their live stream are talking about my real name, my address, my girlfriend, where I live, where my mother lives, and Lue Elizondo was on that talk show.
Exactly what they claimed you did. They're doxing you.
100%, doxing me, going after and fabricating things about me to defame me and even worse. And then go back to where before they got that information, the 72 hours after Who's Lue had been released, Lue Elizondo's on the Tom Fessler show answering questions about my show. They're like, let me ask you some questions. Like one of the questions I asked was where and when did he and his wife get married? Because I couldn't find a marriage record or certificate. Pretty mundane question, a pretty simple question. It's not an attack. It's just like, were you guys married and when, But he was on there asking them, and he spent 10 minutes answering questions. And then at the end of it, he just goes on and he riles them up. He's like, you guys are my wolf pack. You guys, I'm looking over at my side. You guys, I'm glad that you're here defending me and fighting for me. And that sparked a online frenzy of people centered around this group, Tom Fessler and his producer, Rob Heatherly, who they called the wolf pack. And they just started coming after me.
Manny, okay, we're going to have to stop there. We got to take our break. It's 2 or 3 minutes. We'll be back. We can pick up right there. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Dark Matters Radio. Tonight, my very special guest, Manny, and his website up there and his video is available for all to see. And we'll be back with a lot more right after these words. We are back with Mark Jaggeri and Manny. Manny, before we had to go to break. You were talking about the experiences you were undergoing. Did you have more you wanted to say about that?
Yeah, so it started when the film first came out, but it does continue to this day. There's organized groups out there of people that are championing for Lue Elizondo on social media. And if you question his narrative, then they go out and they take it upon themselves to try to gang bully, gang stalk, and harass you into silence to create this echo chamber, specifically on UFO Twitter. It's something that's become real apparent in the last few months. People are really starting to become wise to it. And I've called it out kind of since day one. And a lot of times people will gaslight me and they're like, oh, you're just being paranoid. Like there's no group of people out there. And it's come to light that, yeah, there is. There's actual groups of people who have Discord servers and Facebook groups who do this. And I've pointed out also that Elizondo is well aware of it. He's been made aware of it. And that he not only turns a blind eye to the behavior because it benefits him, but that in some cases he actively encourages it and encourages these people and reinforces the behavior by following them on social media, liking the posts and things like that, and using his own confirmed sock puppet accounts, which is something that he's been caught doing multiple times. Creating a sock puppet account, which I don't know if people know what those are. It's a fake account that's not linked to his own personal account, his official account, but he uses that to interact with people. And that's where that name Faceless Bureaucrat that we spoke about earlier came out, is that was the name of one of his sock puppet accounts that he used for years. And he would use that to encourage people to go out and dox and harass critics and some of the things that people have experienced. And it's not just me. There are other people out there who have been the targets of these people, and it's been horrific. I've seen people's immediate family members, their grandparents, their wives, their children, their minor children gone after, where people post pictures of somebody's child in their school and is like, oh, how's so and so doing, or name the mascot of their school as a veiled way to try to intimidate someone into not questioning Elizondo. And it's really kind of perplexing, because you don't really see that in ufology too often. I mean, like I try to go back and think about people disagreeing about Bob Lazar 6 or 7 years ago, and somebody getting doxxed and harassed over, whether they believe Bob Lazar's story or they don't. And they might argue over it, but you wouldn't see the level of venom that you're seeing in it nowadays, where if you disagree with this agenda or this narrative that Elizondo's trying to sell, that you must be canceled, and any ends justify the means. They'll create evidence against you if they have none. They'll fabricate stories if they have none, and they'll just spread it, all around until people believe it and don't want to talk to you. I wouldn't be surprised.
Jesus, sounds like this election cycle.
Right. It could be worse. It could be, honestly, at this point, I'd almost rather talk about politics because it seems safer than ufology with some of these people, and that's kind of a weird thing to say, but
let
that's
me
kind of where we're
interject
at.
this, Manny. Let me interject this, because really what your documentary is a challenge. It's asking a question, not just in the title, but the overall thing. Like, what are these things? And all he has to do is answer it.
Right.
And it ends the argument. And that he's prolonging this and, calling his little wolf pack to defend him only shows that there's someone's a huckster here, because all he's got to do is tell the truth. Mark, am I correct in this? Don?
Absolutely. Hey, you have to clear something up for me. Mellon tells us that he got, this might have been the original videos that were released, like the Tic Tac and all that. He got one of those in a parking lot from somebody. But then Lue says he's the one that got it and released it. So what's the truth? Was it Mellon or was it Lue?
There's a paper trail about those videos, and I've dug into it extensively. John Greenwald at the Black Vault got a bunch of the documents done, released through FOIA, and then some of the most incriminating evidence that talks about those videos was actually inadvertently released by Christopher Mellon on his own website, and then quickly taken down. But of course, the internet being what it is, once one person got a copy of those, they're out there. And I've posted these on my Twitter feed. You'll see the request from Elizondo. There's an email chain where he's trying to get those videos declassified for months before he left the Pentagon. And as pointed out in my film, this was also during the time that he had already sent his wife out to move to California to live within minutes of the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences headquarters in Encinitas. So he's planning that move. He's trying to get those videos declassified. At some point, they're not declassified, but they are printed and put onto 3 CD-ROMs or 4 CD-ROMs. And I have a photo of those CD-ROMs, and on the CD-ROMs is written the name Lue Elizondo, Luis Elizondo's name and a date. Within 72 hours, I think, of those films or those videos being put onto those CDs and handed off to Lue Elizondo, they end up in Christopher Mellon's hands and in the Pentagon parking lot from a former defense official who we can only assume is Lue Elizondo.
Oh, okay.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me, is that Elizondo met Mellon in the parking lot, handed them over to Chris Mellon with the videos, and Mellon physically removed them from the property. And the reason that probably is because if Elizondo had done that, he would probably have gone to jail for it. But they knew that somebody with Mellon's credentials and money, they weren't going to go after lightly, especially not for bending the rules a little bit, as Chris Mellon calls it, in the greater good. And that's exactly what he says in the Phenomenon movie by Jim Fox when talking about the videos, where he said that about the brown paper sack. You know, he excuses it as bending the rules for a greater good. And I think he just knew that he's, in that case, is untouchable. I mean, he'd have to do something pretty egregious. Now, there was an AFOSI investigation into the leak of those videos. And the OSI determined that the videos were released improperly. It was considered unauthorized disclosure, and they referred it back to the OUSDI for further action. So it went back to the Undersecretary of Defense for action. And for some reason, somewhere between the OSI recommending action and the OUSDI receiving the referral, nothing happened. So the investigation says, yeah, these guys did something wrong. They stole these videos and released them improperly. They never should have been released to the Times, let alone to the public in general. They weren't technically classified, but they were considered what's sensitive. And that had they been asked, they would have never approved them to be released. But then there's still nothing comes of it, you know, and Elizondo gets to keep his clearance. Mellon doesn't get any criminal charges, even though he admitted to it in public. You know, like it seems real weird to me. It seems real odd. And then you've got the government a few months after that officially releasing the videos on the DIA website. Now you can go and look at the 3 videos. They're in their full form. They're there. So now they're like, well, yeah, we wanted to do that to dispel any confusion.
Yeah,
these are real videos.
Well, let me ask, what
is out there? You can't stop it. So.
Right.
Well, yeah. But what kind of congressional friendships do these guys have?
Well, look at who's championing this cause on the Hill right now. And that'll tell you. I mean, it's Andre Carson at one point.
So this is why we're not seeing, if these are Democrats have a way of working the DOJ and the FBI into, oh, wink, wink, just look away from this. This will be okay. They're one of us. And I don't know, man, there's some political motivation going on here.
Well, there is, but it's not partisan. I mean, it's both sides. I mean, Tim Burchett's not a Democrat. He's a hardcore Republican. You know what I mean? And
also
Nancy Mace, right?
Mace.
So,
yeah.
So it really is a bipartisan thing, but there's definitely some political motivations. There's no doubt that there's a UFO vote out there. I mean, the studies have shown that there's like, you know, I think 40 or 50% of Americans believe in alien and extraterrestrial life, and that these are all voting people. And it hasn't been a voting segment forever, but you know, the last 10 years or so, it seems like we can't get away from it. Every election cycle, it just gets thrown in our face and then dies down again after November. You know, like it seems like it's become a partisan issue, and they're all trying to get votes on it.
And Manny, let me cut to the very beginning of all of this. From the time that Elizondo first went public in a major way, okay, he discussed his credentials. Okay. Now, you've done, by all accounts, the most incisive, in-depth investigation of anybody up to this point. What the hell, in your opinion, did he actually do at the Pentagon with ATIP?
To the best of my recollection or knowledge, from everything that I've looked at over the years, ATIP was an unofficial, off the books volunteer activity that he was asked to do on behalf of probably Harry Reid. It was not funded. It was not an official part of his duties. His official duties were at the National Program Special Management Staff, I think it was called, working under 2 layers down under Gary Reid. That was his official duties. So his unofficial duties was ATIP, and ATIP, from what I understand, had a very limited portfolio of UAP sightings to look at, one of which, the most famous, which is the Go Fast video that's out there. Obviously Gimbal and the other, all the 3 videos that they leaked were part of that portfolio. In my opinion, the portfolio existed of 144 UAP sightings, which were named in the 180-day UFO report. And that's what the DOD was doing in the 180-day report, was basically outing Elizondo, outing ATIP, and saying, we're admitting everything that you talked about at ATIP and everything you had. We're just getting in front of this. We're getting it out there. So if you look at that report and look at the scope of UAP sightings that they had, that's probably what they were looking at. What was their agenda there? I don't think it was to study UFOs. It's nothing like what he said it was. If you go back to the MUFON symposium he did in 2018, I think it was, he talks about what ATIP was, and he's got these slides up on screen, but those are doctored slides that Jim Stratton made for, that Jay Stratton made for OSAP. So that really was a part of what OSAP was doing, not ATIP. And there's some confusion there, because at one point ATIP was a nickname for OSAP on paper, but that's not to be confused with what Elizondo's ATIP was, which is where he took the name over, started this program, but it had all the legitimacy of a Pentagon Bridge Club. If you're sitting in the cafeteria on your lunch break playing bridge and they've got an unofficial Pentagon Bridge Club, that's pretty much what ATIP was. There was no funding. There's no paper trail of where's the reports. And that's something that Stan Friedman said right before he passed. He was on John Greenwald that the Black Vault did a podcast with Stan Friedman, said, what do you think about Lue Elizondo and ATIP? And he said, well, he's saying some really cool things, but where's the reports? Where's the mountains of documents that are supporting this story that we can FOIA, that we can get access to? And there's none of that. And here we are 7 years later, and we have nothing. There's nothing there.
Something else with unidentified and all this other business going on, I've never understood, and I've talked about it to Gary, I've talked about it to Mark. I'm a historian, okay? That was my major in college originally, way back when I wanted to be a history instructor. I love history. And this field, boy, I've taken a deep, deep dive in this field. And going back to the late 40s, there are some stellar events that happened in this field that today are virtually forgotten. Now, my question to you is, why do you think that they've never taken a look at any of these historical events? For example, 1967, incursions into ICBM silos by UFOs. Same in the mid-70s. Well, I could go on and on. I'm not going to, but they virtually totally ignored anything in the history of this field. Do you have any idea why?
Yeah, I mean, historically speaking, it's how do you investigate that? So a good case to look at and to discuss is the Vandenberg AFB sighting where the UFO zaps a warhead and shoots it down. Dr. Bob Jacobs, who was an operator, and that's a pretty famous story. So apparently, according to Elizondo,
well, there's video of that too, by the way.
Right. So according to Elizondo, there is video of that. And he says that he told Dr. Sean Kirkpatrick, the former director of AARO, exactly where to find that video. Go into this room in the Pentagon, go into this desk or this safe or whatever on this shelf is the video. Sean Kirkpatrick goes in there and there's nothing there. What do you do with that at that point? If you don't have the video, if you don't have clear-cut documents of it, how do you investigate something that's 50, 60, in some case, 70 years old? I mean, there's only so much, and that's something that I think there's a frustration that Kirkpatrick had when he was in charge of AARO. He said the same thing. He's like, a lot of this, it sounds really great, but we start to run it down and it just ends up falling apart after the story because there's no evidence to track down. There's nothing to find, we did that with Roswell when Congressman Schiff asked the GAO to investigate, right? And they did a huge deep dive into Roswell, and they said, a lot of the records were destroyed. This is what we found. It was Project Mogul, whether you believe it or not. I'm just saying they did the investigation, and they came out with a bunch of stuff then, and at least gave us a story, whether it's something that's true or not.
3 years of that communication information by law had to stay there, and it disappeared. Now, I got to tell you, pal, I'm not surprised when stuff disappears. Okay. I've been there. I've seen it. All right. It happens. And especially with this field, with UFOs, the government / UFO problem. Well, hey, a number of months ago, I wrote a paper about that very thing, about disclosure and why it will never, ever happen the way the true believers think that it's going to happen. It won't.
Right. And, Don, I am surprised when stuff disappears because I'm pretty sure the government still has my grandparents' dental records from the Korean War. You know what I mean? But here we are, and we're talking about something important like a UFO and alien life, and suddenly the records are just gone, and that makes me very suspicious.
Let's go back to ATIP real quick. Is ATIP my assumption is that all ATIP was the outgrowth of the friendship between Reed and Bigelow. And they would get around and talk about the stuff, and then they kind of make this bridge club for the UFOs, right? They don't give it any money except the $22 million that went to Bigelow, right?
Yeah,
but didn't go into the bridge club. And it seems to me that that's all this was their friendship manifesting itself into this, as you say, bridge club.
Right. And then we learned also that at the same time that Elizondo's at the Pentagon running ATIP is that they've moved Kona Blue, which they were trying to become a special access program. They've moved to the NSA because it was the DIA said, no, we're not going to do that. And that Kona Blue was the program that they were basically trying to get going to go to Bigelow as probably a one bid or a no bid contract as well to reverse engineer the UFOs that they were going to get from, Lockheed or Boeing or whoever's got them, that's when Grush and some of these other people came out and said, oh, we know that there's a reverse engineering program out there. We know it. We know it for a fact. What are they talking about? Kona Blue, the program that they were trying to get put into place. Yeah. It's the self-licking ice cream cone. It's the circle that perpetuates itself, of these people. And it's like, what the hell is going on here? Yeah.
And as the true seeker always bangs about, Grush, 400 days later, nothing. Stories. I'm not saying that he could release stuff, but again, self-licking. It's like, well, come on, man. And who was behind him when he was speaking? Corbell and Knapp.
Yep, one on either side of him, just like perfect little handlers.
And supposedly, if I remember this correctly, for a couple of years before he came out, he was hanging with those guys, going to conventions and stuff. And
absolutely. There's a famous photograph that's Dave Grush, George Knapp, Travis Taylor, Dr. Travis Taylor from Splain Walker Ranch, and then I think Jay Stratton, and they're all like sitting at a Denny's after like a Star Trek convention in Vegas or some UFO convention, and this was before Dave Grush had come out to the public, which is very, very sketchy because you look at that time, and that's when George and Jeremy were releasing the Mosul orb. They had the jellyfish UFO. They had other classified intel that they shouldn't have had access to, that they were getting leaked, that had all gone through the UAP task force, which Dave Grush had access to, and makes me wonder if he wasn't the one leaking that to them, which might actually have more to do with why he was asked to leave the Air Force than retaliatory things or his past or whatever.
Do you have a view of the next meeting on November 13th? I think they're going to have one for Congress. Is it going to be the same kind of thing in your estimation, the dog and pony show? again.
Right.
Yeah. For one, it's going to be an open briefing, which means public. So anything that's real juicy or is classified
Right.
wouldn't be talked about there anyways. And you're going to hear a lot of that, like you heard in Grush's testimony. Oh, I'd be glad to reveal that to you in a skiff after the meeting. I'd be glad to reveal that to you in a skiff. And they're going to hide behind classification for anything that's good. But there's a problem with that, is that the programs that they're talking about are illegal programs, allegedly, according to Dave Grush. So how is an illegal program classified? Because you have to be a legal program to get a legal classification, right? So it's like you can't have your cake and eat it too. It's either illegal, and if it's illegal, well, then you can go to the Times, you can go to WikiLeaks, you can come here on Dark Matters and talk about it, because it's an illegal program and it doesn't have legal classification.
Right.
So there's no reason. The only reason that they hide behind that is because I think they know that these programs are not illegal. They're probably legal. They're probably being reported in the proper way. They're probably completely above board. And that's why they don't want to risk talking about them and risk leaking something that's classified and get some real trouble.
Well, the bottom line about this whole thing is, and I state this in the paper I wrote, there is, in my opinion, and not only me, many in the intelligence community that believe that there is a core secret to this phenomenon that only a very, very few people are privy to. And that core secret is protected by an SAP, a special access program, which means it will never see the light of day, ever. And that's the bottom line. So everything else is just self-gratification.
Yeah.
Right. Back to Who's Lue. Because we got about 40 minutes to go here, and I don't want to run out of time. If you were to pick the top 3 or 5 things about what you uncovered to you that are most problematic about his behavior, his morals, his ethics, his financial, his this or that, what 3 to 5 things would you say, dude, these are red, these are glowing red?
Yeah. It's Mark, to directly answer your question. I think the biggest red flag is something you touched on earlier, which is the started and failed businesses, the get rich quick schemes, as I call them in the film. The nautical patents that come from a guy who's got a biology and science background. Not an engineering background, but a guy who's riding the bus or the train across the bridge with his friend every day to the Pentagon, and they're coming up with boat patents trying to get license them to Lockheed or to the Navy or whoever and get rich quick. So the businesses, and those honestly have continued to this day. He's still starting and burning businesses into the ground. You've got Skyfort that he was a part of, that was supposed to take over some of the failed business ventures that they had at To the Stars Academy, specific regards to another television show after Unidentified. They wanted to do another UFO show that he tried to pitch, which is different from another UFO show that they tried to pitch to HBO. And now he's part of this UAP Disclosure Fund, which is a nonprofit, I think, but he's also got for-profit businesses that he's setting up locally in the state that he lives, and also like another consulting company, just all these businesses. I think that's the biggest red flag, especially when you see them start up and shut down within a year or two with no posted records of any form of sales, or it seems like they're just startups that are shells for something. And what is it? It seems like he's maneuvering himself to be in place for a government contract or a no bid contract or something like that he's going to try to get, because Bigelow is mostly defunct. I mean, Bigelow Aerospace in 2020 laid off all of their employees, I believe, and they haven't been functional since in the last 4 years. So somebody's going to need to pick up those contracts that Bigelow would have gotten. And a guy like Lue who's already got the TSSCI clearance and the political backgrounds, to try to get some connections, to know when these contracts are coming out, he could definitely do some kind of antitrust move and maneuver himself into place to be the only person in position to get one of those $22 million contracts, which would tickle him pink, in my opinion. I think he would just die to get a contract like OSAP.
So is To the Stars completely done?
As far as the aerospace engineer, science and tech goes, pretty much, yeah. I think Hal Puthoff's still technically affiliated with them, but I think he's resigned as their director of science and technology. So he's not drawing a salary anymore like he was for the first few years. And then during COVID, they got some Paycheck Protection Act funds and used, I think, to the tune of $100,000 they used to pay off their lease at the building there in Encinitas and move out. So I think they're pretty much done as far as that goes. And they've instead shifted into the music, the Angels and Airwaves, which are still doing the books and the intellectual property licensing with all of Tom DeLonge's music and books and things like that, the Secret Machines books and other things like that. And then the movies, they just recently did the Monsters of California film, which they brought in some Hollywood big names to help with. There was a guy by the name of Chris Miser and another one by the name of Stan Spry, one of which owns a film finance company called Cartel Entertainment, who has a business and advisory connection with to the Stars. So they've shifted solely into entertainment, which puts them off of my radar. I don't really follow them anymore because it's so
right. So they were trying to do the high technology, and we're going to build an engine, and we're going to do this and that. And it seems as though the only reason they floated that was to just try to get people ramped up to give them the money for that, and nothing came of any of that.
No, it didn't. And if Steve Justice hadn't have been there, I would say that I thought it was just a big scam. But with his name attached to it, I have, for one, I love it. I'm an aviation guy. I love studying aircraft. I love looking at the stuff that we've built. I love our secret ops. I love talking to people like TD Barnes, who worked at Area 51 on the Ox Cart and, things like that. I love that stuff. And I would love to have dinner with Steve Justice and just pick his brain about anything that he can tell me. And I think he's above board. I don't think they could have gotten him on board if it was just a grift to get people to buy stock. Unfortunately, I think there was something there. I don't know what it was. I don't know if they got whiffed that some kind of technology was going to be soon declassified, that they might be able to license to create something, or what the plan was. But they definitely had a plan A at To the Stars Academy that seemed legitimate. And they didn't raise nearly as much money as they thought they were going to raise. Obviously, the stock offering initial made less than $1 million. They were asking for 50.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
They didn't get hardly any. I think in altogether, it was either just over $2 or $3 million altogether in like 4 or 5 stock offerings. And that's nowhere near what they needed. They needed, in order to develop what they would have wanted, you could have had an angel investor come in with 100 million. It might not be enough. 200 million might not be enough, but it would almost be a blank check. I mean, if you could produce that flying car that they're talking about with a microfusion device to power it, you'd upset everything in the world, from energy generation to transportation, like everything. You'd go down in history as like the best inventor since Edison, or Tesla, like your name would be in the books. And
it is interesting that, I don't really know those guys and that they're really what their backgrounds were, but you do have guys like Musk and those people out there, even people that we don't know about.
They would be consultants. They've been serious.
How come you're not bringing these guys in who are already doing this and have proof of concept of terrestrial technology, and you're not even inviting these guys in?
Right.
Exactly.
It seems like that would be your first go-to as a company like SpaceX or Elon Musk.
You would consult Elon Musk.
Or look at where Steve Justice ended up after TTSA. He's working at or Blue Origin Space.
Yeah.
Now that makes perfect sense. Those are the types of people, that you would expect. So yeah, it was really interesting that they didn't have those types of people. And if you go and look at on the Who's Lue webpage underneath the Who's Lue video, it's embedded there. There's another one I called Who's to the Stars, or Who's to TSA, which is kind of a follow-up I did, it's like a 45-minute video. And in the last 20 minutes, I go into the financials of To the Stars. And if you're really interested in that, just watch the last 20 minutes of that video, and it'll give you a breakdown of the financials based upon their public SEC filings. Because I spent a significant amount of time going through their SEC filings and looking at the numbers and looking at how that business was set up. And, my overall impression of it was that it just turned into Tom DeLonge's piggy bank, because every dollar that came in just went right back to Tom DeLonge in some way, shape, or form, whether it was royalties for his likeness or royalties for his music, or to pay for Angels and Airwaves, or to.
How is that not criminal? That just is.
It's because they're not a nonprofit, and they're not a public corporation. They're what's called a public benefit corporation, which is, was established, I think, in 2010, and is not real well known about what they are. I didn't know what it was until I looked it up. I was like, what the hell's a public benefit corporation? Exactly. They get to spend so a public corporation, if you're selling stocks to the public that are listed on one of the exchanges, you have a legal responsibility to make decisions for your company that are in the benefit of your stockholders, right? That's like your one legal responsibility. You don't have moral responsibilities. You only have one legal responsibility. Like that's the one thing you can do that'll get you into hot water is to do stuff like Tom DeLonge's doing it to the stars. But because it's a public benefit a public benefit corporation, they claim that this disclosure is the public benefit. So everything that they've done there, every penny they pay to Tom DeLonge is part of the disclosure process. And then in their filings, they take credit just like everybody else does. They're like, we're the reason that the Hill's talking about this. We're the reason there's a UAP Disclosure Act. We're the reason that the TV shows are being made. We're the reason that people are talking on social media about UFOs.
We're the reason. Yeah.
100%. And then, on the next podcast, Lue Elizondo is taking credit for it. And on the next podcast, Jeremy and George are taking credit for it. And you're just like, what the hell is going on here?
So
that's how it's legal.
I will give you big props as well. I haven't looked into it recently, but after you released it and you couldn't find the proof of some business that him and his father or something did, you came out and said, hey, I found something. Has there been other things that you've routinely updated? Because I noticed that you're like that and you're just not going to let it sit there. You're going to work on it.
Yeah. So the business license was made aware of me after the film came out. So I updated that on the website. The only other fact that was in question was something that Lue talked about himself when he was on that podcast 72 hours after the film came out, which was the county and the city that him and his wife were married in and when they were married. And then I went to go verify that. And of course, it's that particular county, you can't search online for a marriage record. You need to physically walk into the courthouse with a certificate with the people's names on it, signed and dated, and pay a fee to get that marriage license. So I don't beat myself up for not finding that on the internet, because I had no idea where they lived at that point. Like when they were married, like they've been, as you saw in the film, they were all over the place. It could have been any one of number of places. And I did a pretty extensive search to find that out, The
problematic part is some of that was when he was supposedly attached to the military. And you can't really do that unless they're moving you.
Right. And that actually goes to why I investigated his wife in the first place, was because I assumed when I started doing this project that he was some kind of super spy soldier, military guy. I was expecting to find nothing in the public record about him. And as I started to find a footprint that looked like an everyday citizen, I became each data point made me more and more suspicious. Like if he had been doing the things that he claimed that he was doing, if he was the Fox Mulder running around in the Middle East and kicking doors open and chasing down UFOs and going to Guantanamo Bay and stuff, I felt like I shouldn't have found anything. And instead what I found was a footprint that was very, very well known and was easy to locate. They didn't do any sort of trying to hide his digital footprint.
Right. Right. Don brought up something to me, and I don't know anything about this. I wasn't in the service. I watch it on the movies. That's all I do. And he was mentioning, I noticed this with Corbell, and I don't know what his background is, but with Lue, when you're covered in tattoos and identifying marks and stuff, that isn't a good thing if you're working black projects, gray projects and things, because it's just going to get out there, right? So no matter what you do up here, you got all this stuff. And it's like Don mentioned that just offhand one time. And he said, gee, I don't think you'd do that if you were doing those projects.
Yeah, it does seem suspicious. And about those tattoos, some people have asked him about some of them. I think there was one of them that is a logo for a very famous like jujitsu dojo. And somebody who actually trained at that dojo asked him about that and said, why do you have this tattoo? Did you train in martial arts? And Lue's face went ghost white and pale. Like he didn't know what the tattoo was that was on his arm, and it's like, oh, you poser, you want to be, just like I said in the film, you want to be. And that's funny because in the movie, if you remember that picture I pop up at the end of him standing in front of, I think it's Kandahar Airport, and he's got he might have a rifle in his hand, he might not, but he's wearing his BDUs.
Yep.
when I went to save that photo off of his webpage, the title was wannabe.jpg. That's what he called it when he uploaded it to his website, wannabe. And I'm like, oh my gosh, man, here's this guy, you know, like, and he's standing at the, you know, the one place where everybody who went over there on a plane has a tourist photo of them in front of that airport, you know, like he's not
that I was here.
Right. He's inside the wire. He's carrying a rifle. He's got no extra magazines on, no canteen, no lantern, no nothing. You know, like he's not in a kit to go out and do battle by any means, let alone survive outside the wire for more than a minute or two without even a canteen. You know, like it just stank. Everything stank, you know, like, and he explained that, you know, he says, oh, I wanted to be home. That's why I called it wannabe, because every time I was deployed, I wanted to be home. And I'm like,
so what you know of Corbell, would you say that there's enough or should be enough for maybe even you to do it or somebody else like the Truth Seeker or something to do the same work on Corbell that's been done on Lue through your documentary?
I think that should be your next one, Manny.
I think so. I think there's enough public information about Jeremy to get that out there. And I've done a little bit of deep dives into him. Nothing like I did into Lue, you know. We're talking a few days.
Well, a lot of work, yeah.
Yeah, but if you go back not too far in his past, you'll see like his when he was a yoga sensei, where he was selling, you know, VHS tapes that are, you know, are real close to like a Billy Blank workout video or something like that. It's true. It's a true story. He had a yoga sensei, and then, you know, he the way that Corbell tells the story, he got sick one day on a trip to India or something like that, and he couldn't do his martial arts anymore, so he had to go do, you know, decided to just become a filmmaker overnight, and went out and, you know, bought a bunch of film equipment and you know, said, hey, I'm an investigative filmmaker. And that's shortly thereafter where he met George Knapp and became, in his own words, you know, a pupil of George's, and George became his mentor and was going to teach him journalism and all that stuff. Yeah. So, but yeah, that information's out there. You know, his financial information about his houses are out there. You know, his plus $1 million home that he bought in California, because making UFO movies is obviously not making him any money. You know, you know, but he bought this really
Billy Blank, because Billy did some great videos and movies, and he created Tybo.
Tybo, I couldn't remember the name. Thanks, Terry.
Well, I'm a big martial arts enthusiast, so yeah.
So what? Oh man, continue.
Can I ask a quick question? Because I'm curious, Manny. What got you on this path? What got you started? I mean, were you a UFO enthusiast? What were you before?
Yeah, I started my UFO YouTube channel, I mean, close to a decade ago, you know, like, and the reason I started the channel is I would go out and watch other people's stuff, and I'm not ashamed to say it. I would watch Secure Team 10. I would watch Third Phase of Moon. I would watch some of the bigger YouTube channels out there. I would watch their stuff, and I would get interested in a subject, and I would go and research it further for myself. You know, like I would use them to get the overall view of something, but I just found that as I dug into stuff, that people weren't really doing the type of research that I wanted to be convinced of some of this stuff. So I would just start digging into things and, you know, doing research. And then I found that at the end of the day, I would just go to bed with that knowledge and I wouldn't share it. And I thought, well, God, why don't I share this with people? Make videos about what I've learned. And so if you go and look my videos, I've always got a list of reference links of things that I discovered during my research. I want people to check my work. And I've always said, you know, tell me what you think after you do all the research that I've done, or look at the stuff that I presented. Give me your opinion. You know, like, I'm not trying to tell people what to think. I want to have a conversation about these subjects and hope to further our group understanding by bringing different points of views to the table, you know, and have other, you know, a bunch of different people looking at it. So that's always been kind of where my YouTube experience started. And my channel's small, you know, like it never took off, and I'm okay with that. I've always been quality over quantity, you know, like I didn't want to do stuff that was like, oh, here's a picture of a flare. And I know it's a flare. It's a Barry Goldwater gunnery range outside of Vegas, you know, or whatever, you know, like I know that's a flare, but I'm going to put it on my YouTube channel and say it's a bunch of orbs and woo it up, you know, like that's not who I am, you know.
Well,
like,
yeah, but you could call it the fourth phase from the moon. Come on.
right. You know, so I'm not.
So the thing I was going to mention to you was in Corbell, and the last thing that they put up there, and I talked to Gary about this, he's up there talking about his dead switch. if they mess with me,
Oh my God, yes.
blah blah blah. And he also brings George Knapp in, and George is a smart guy. He doesn't actually sign on to the dead switch, but he doesn't sign off either. He doesn't sign on or off, right? So this guy's going to play the Greer card because he's got a dead man switch as well. So that's why I brought up the November meeting, because supposedly Mr. Ecker, much to your chagrin, there will be huge disclosure on the Hill with Corbell and the rest of these pricks. And if it's not handled correctly, the dead man switch will be pulled. Discuss.
Bullshit.
Yeah.
The
Again,
minute
though,
you sent that to me, I said bullshit.
and here, even if that's true, which I'm not saying it is, obviously, I don't think it is, but the gatekeeping by such a notion to me is so ridiculous. They're like, oh, I've got all the secrets, but I'm not going to tell you unless somebody kills me. And then it's like,
Exactly.
what? If you got the secrets, just dump them. You know, like get it out there.
And
you know,
there's other ways to get it out there, not attached to you at all.
Oh yeah.
So what you're telling me is he has this information and he's part of a disclosure group.
Yeah.
That doesn't
ring true. And he's the guy that puts out the jellyfish video before they look into it to figure out, we've just done a Jaime Maussan. Oh,
it's
we'll
a
release
balloon.
it and then ask for people
a fucking wedding balloon.
Yeah, one of the former UAP task force members, Sarah Gam, recently talked about that jellyfish sighting, and she said that the analysis of it was classified, so she couldn't really talk about it too much. But she did say unequivocally, she's like, "That is identified. We know exactly what that is, and we knew. We've always known.
Man,
we know.
Fucking balloon.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. I mean, I can understand why possibly it would be classified, because if there's some jerk ops who are going to fly something like that over a secured area, they don't know why they're doing it. They don't know what else could be in that thing. I get it. I get it. But at least she said, we know what that is. That ain't no alien craft.
Right. It could be. Yeah, it could be as simple as they have a confidential informant somewhere in a foreign military who told them what it is. You know, like, oh, we know exactly what that is. It's Project XYZ that we're working on. They're like, oh, well, they're not going to reveal that. That's sources and methods. You know, like, of course that's going to be classified, but it has nothing to do with flying saucers and little green men, you know, like at all.
And yet they released that thing with no research. They just, they couldn't help.
No,
just
on
like
top of that,
just like Greer, they couldn't help themselves.
Yeah.
Mark, I thought it had been publicly identified before Corbell released that.
No, it was right after, and then they found that it was some kind of that balloon for the celebration or something like that.
Some kind of reflective Mylar
our
balloon
friend
or something.
Mark, the other Mark with a C,
D'Antonio.
Yeah, I thought he was one of the people that analyzed it.
That's a D, Gary. D'Antonio, that's a D. It's not a C.
What does that mean? Big dick? I don't understand what you mean.
Well, hey, if you have time, because I know you'll always put up the new information about Lue. If you have time in your life, I'd really like you to do one on Corbell, because there's something about this guy it's a problem. It's the way he presents the information, and I don't know him from Adam. I'm just watching him present this information. I don't know, man. Like you said, they got, I forget the guy's name who you'd like to talk to, who knows about the aviation and aircrafts and all that, who was part of
Steve Justice.
Yeah, right. They must have had something to entice him to come in, right? Well, what does Corbell have to entice Knapp to come in? Because Knapp has decades of goodwill, and that goodwill is going in the shitter.
Yeah, it's in the shitter already. It's his people aren't trusting him anymore because of his involvement with Corbell.
Right.
Yeah, it seems like his reputation's gone downhill over the last few years because of that. And what would have got him to connect himself with Corbell? I mean, I don't know. I mean, like it seems like it might be financially motivated because from what I understand, George is partial owner in all of Corbell's films because he gave him all the content. You know, like all of his research. You know, he's an executive producer. You know, like so it might be financially, but I hate to think that. I mean, George was doing pretty well off before that. So I don't know that he really would need it. You know, like it almost seems like it was more of maybe to help with his legacy, you know, pass the torch type thing. Right. I mean, I don't know. I would like
Wrong guy.
Definitely the wrong guy. Too. Definitely. And I agree with what you said, Mark, about Corbell's presentation. If you go and look at the various conventions that he talks at, he's arrogant, he's rude, he cuts people off to argue with them. Like where he was on stage with Stan Friedman and they were talking about Bob Lazar, and he just kept cutting Stan off and being like a Chad bro. It was like an uppity college kid who thought that they knew more than the professor and just wouldn't shut up and let the professor talk. You know, like it was infuriating. And I felt like the level of disrespect there, you know, he's like, oh, come on, Stan, haven't you ever lied to get chicks? You know, and I'm like,
what did I say earlier, man? Corbell is a narcissist. You can tell by the way he makes the Lazar documentary. It's not about Bob Lazar. It's about him.
Right.
And that shit that he throws in about himself. It's like, what the fuck are you doing?
So people have used that term to describe Lue Elizondo as well. And so that might also tell you why there's friction between the two, because one thing a narcissist hates is another narcissist.
Don't like each other.
No. Yeah. And the same thing has been said about Tom DeLonge too. So you've got all these strong personalities, whether they're clinically narcissistic or not, but they're all in, you know, and they go together for a little bit, but ultimately they have to part ways because they just can't do it. You know, they all want to be the big dog in the room. And that's something that I've heard about Elizondo from multiple people, is that, like, you know, like when you're brought onto a phone call with Lue, they're like, even if he says something that's completely wrong, don't correct him. Just let him go on with it. Don't correct him. Don't get into a pissing match with him. Don't do anything to ruffle his feathers, or he'll take flight and you'll never hear from him again. Or even worse, he'll cut you off at the knees and tell everyone to blacklist you, and then you lose your access, which is something that a lot of people who are on the inside are afraid of. They don't want to lose that access to that, because it's not just Lue, it's Gary Nolan, it's Jay Stratton, it's George and Jeremy to some degree. You know, like it's this whole cadre of people that are what is the current disclosure movement. You know, that's who they are, and they don't want to lose the access. Even Jim Fox said that earlier. He's like, not too long ago, he said, I'll tell you everything I know, but I don't want to lose access to these people. You know, like I'll get kicked out of the group and they won't tell me anything. You know, and it's like,
God damn it, that's bullshit.
Isn't it? You know, isn't that the antithesis of journalism and truth seeking?
It goes against it completely.
Yeah, it is. And, you know, like, and that's this group, you know, like,
now I know why I'm not one of the in kids.
Yeah. They did some research on you, Don, and they, you know, in the film I said that about Lue. I said, you know, before he goes on a podcast, he does a scratch and sniff, you know, like he'll go and do his research. And if he catches a whiff that you're even at all questioning of him, he will just ignore you and ice you and shine you on and kick the can down the road, which is what he does, or just straight up ignore you.
So George Knapp has this new show going to come on Netflix, right? Alien Investigation, or Investigation Alien. And for some reason, his name's escaping me, but the skeptic guy who looks into the videos, and he looked at the trailer and blew the trailer apart. The trailer's like 2 minutes long.
That was Mick West, right? Yeah.
Mick West, man. Amazing work. He slows it down, and he basically blows apart almost every clip in it as a known nothing. A couple of them he said, oh, that's kind of a cool clip. I haven't seen that before. I don't know what that is. But he just takes the trailer and just annihilates it with known research already done. Much like what I always bitch at these guys about when they show the internally lit blimps from the 90s. Look at that. Look at that. With the blinking lights on the bottom. It's a UFO. It's an internally lit blimp.
I told you the story about what happened to me right after I moved down to LA, right? So we're living down in LA itself, and one night, it was just dusk, and I walked out to the kitchen, and from the kitchen there was a door where you could walk out into the driveway where my vehicle was parked. So for some reason I decided to go outside, and it was hot too. And I don't think we had AC then. But at any rate, I opened up the door. I walked out. And there's this giant goddamn thing in the sky, lit up like a neon sign. And honest to God, I stopped. my heart practically stopped. And I'm thinking to myself, what in the hell is that? And then I saw it was the Goodyear blimp. I'm telling you.
Which
Oh,
is shocking because
God.
it's so damn big when it's close. It's like, oh my God, this thing is so big.
And lit up. I mean, it was,
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
for just a second, I thought, my God, is that a UFO?
It's a mothership. It's a mothership.
Yeah.
Take me.
Will Smith. Will Smith.
Yeah.
Have you ever had a sighting, Manny?
No, I haven't. I'm constantly looking up and I'm constantly looking for stuff, but I've never seen anything that I would dub anomalous, you know.
You and I are
or-
twins then,
yeah,
because I've never
yeah.
had an
I've
experience
seen
either.
the
And it's broken my
Starlink
heart.
twice, and I called Dawn going, "Oh my God!" And then I went on to the internet and I started. Oh, it was a Starlink trail. But
And
at
you're gonna
first
see
I'm
those.
going, oh shit! I've seen something.
Those are cool when you see them, you know, a long line of them deployed,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
when they're in their low Earth orbit, because it takes them, I don't know, a month or two to move into their final spot in the
Right,
constellation.
right.
And so they're in the varying, but when they first come out, and if you watch the live launches, you'll see them that, you know, when they're launching them, it's like it's like a gun magazine that they've got these things loaded into. And it's like, poof,
Yep.
one comes out, poof, another, and they take off. And it's really cool to watch. And I would encourage people, I'm glad that if you're out there sky watching, you should do that. Get on the Starlink site. There's another LEO site that has all the low Earth objects, satellites that are out there, and even debris. And if you're trying to find UFOs, you know, between like ADS-B2 sites like Flight Radar 24 and then other sites that tell you where the satellites are, you can rule out a huge chunk of the stuff that's out there. You know, like if it's not a satellite, it's not a plane, then it's worth looking at. But if it's something that's on one of those tracking systems, you know, a lot of times that's what you see is a satellite flaring, so it catches the sun when it's banking on the horizon. Yeah, and that's been a problem for years.
So
It's only going to get worse.
We've got a white African who's able to land a fuselage in a grabber, and yet
The size of a skyscraper, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
To the stars don't pick up the phone. I think we might be able to put you on our board.
Right. And there's some really smart people working out there. One of the guys who goes to the APEC, the Alternative Propulsion Engineering Conference, is a SpaceX engineer also, so he works in conventional rocketry, but he's also following alternative propulsion as well. Really smart guy. I've talked to him a few times, you know, and those are the types of people that you would have on board. You know, there's a guy like the alien scientist, Jeremy Riss, that's on YouTube. You know, he's working with Falcon Labs. They're doing alternative propulsion as well. You know, like there's some people that they should have contacted, but instead they had Hal Puthoff and Kit Green, which is like, man, it was the same guys who were with Joe Firmage in Utah trying to do the same thing years before and failed. You know, like they just couldn't get it done. So I don't understand why they thought a new state with a new front man and a new influx of cash was going to make it work when it didn't work before.
Well, now look, if Musk could play bass, they might have invited him in.
He definitely would be in that what's it called, the Hitchhiker band with Jay Stratton and yeah, those guys, man. He definitely would be playing at the you know Phenomicon, you know, or some of the other conventions out there.
Well, I'm very happy about the work you did, dude. When I saw that thing and I watched it, I had to watch it in 3 sessions because it's very long. But I watched that thing and I was just like, man, much like the Truth Seeker, no matter what people might think of Steven and, you know, his presentation is his own and all that, there are very few people who are willing to put in the work and call these people out like Linda Moulton Howe and all these others and just incessantly, I mean, Steven just goes after them every night of the week, banging the drum, wake up people. And he's not one of those guys saying it doesn't exist. He doesn't know. He just says, this is horse shit. And they're selling you, they're grifters. They're trying to make whatever little money.
Well, I gotta say, I've been doing this now almost 38 years professionally. And how I maintain my sanity is still a conundrum for me. Okay.
Even more so since I joined the gang.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Steven's great, and I'm glad he's out there calling this stuff out because we need some skeptical voices in the community. And unfortunately, it's not very popular to do that. You know,
No, it's not at all.
Well,
you get turned
Because
on, you get
can still
attacked.
believe in the existence of UFOs, whether they're alien or interdimensional. I believe in them. I think
Yeah.
all of us in this room have a belief in them. The problem is some of the people out there that are talking that put themselves out front to be spokesmen for disclosure and what these things are hucksters. They're snake oil salesmen, and it's really annoying. And it's not being a skeptic to call these guys out. They think it's being a skeptic. No, it's just you spot bullshit. Bullshit. You hear it.
Well,
And
again,
guys
Gary, Greer tells really cool stories, and I will agree.
Yeah,
when
I know.
see this stuff, I listen to that going, wow, these are very cool.
Amazing stories that have no way of verifying. Joe Rogan and Sean Ryan are good at getting these guys on, but they don't question them.
Right after Greer entered the public fray, back about 90 or 91, he called up UFO Magazine, Vicky and I, and he wanted to have lunch with us. So we said, sure. So we went downtown to this restaurant, met him, sat down. Guy was very charming, very personable. And I had just completed an article in the magazine about, I won't call them hostile actions taken against people, but intentionally, but a number of incidents where people were sorely wounded or killed. Okay. So Greer started with this business. The aliens are here for our benefit. They're going to show us the way, blah, blah, blah. And I listened to that for about 30 seconds. And I said, whoa, wait a minute. And then I hit him with this article I just wrote. Well, I'm an emergency room doctor. And sometimes we'll have a patient that comes in that I've got to do something to that they find very painful, but it's for their benefit. And as soon as I heard that, I knew it was bullshit. And I called it bullshit. And the bottom line,
I bet he didn't like that.
That was it. That was the end of our.
Okay, big question. Who paid for lunch?
I think we did.
But the thing is this, right? You've got Greer saying they're all that the abductions are done by the government and the ETs and stuff are here for our help. But then you got Grush saying that he knows of people who've gotten murdered because of the situation. Now, he didn't say necessarily that they were ETs that murdered them, but just in the scope of the situation, people have been killed. And it's like, that's an interesting thing to say, unsubstantiated. Very interesting.
Yeah, by the way, gang, let me just say this. Our illustrious 5-star producer, Ms. Chanel, gave me the opportunity to go a couple of extra minutes. I said, sure, let's do it. But now we're down to about 40 seconds. So,
oh my God, we're going to die.
With that being said, Manny, do you have any last words that you want to throw out there? Give everybody your website again where they can view the video, etc.
Yeah, if you go to whosluemovie.com, you can get access to the film directly. You can find it on my YouTube channel as well. But if you go to the website, all of the documents that I used in the making of the film are on the website, so you can watch the movie and inspect the documents at the same time if you want to go over it and get a further understanding of what's going on. And you can also find me on Twitter at RealArea503, where I'm active daily.
Well, I got to tell you, pal, this has been an awesome, awesome show. Thank you so much. We're definitely going to have to do this again. The good Lord's willing, the river don't rise. Mark, Gary, thanks so much, guys. And we'll see you all next time. Have a great week.
God bless them.